Well, sweeps are hard, as the Cardinals found out on Sunday at Busch Stadium. But how about those Blues evening up the series at Enterprise? We'll talk about both of those St. Louis sports teams coming up on b-schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is the late evening hours now of Sunday, April 27th, 2025. Today was a busy day of sports in downtown St. Louis. Cardinals did not get the sweep of the Milwaukee Brewers that they were looking for. They lose 7-1 at Busch. We'll talk a little bit about that game. The Blues, however, got the big win over the Winnipeg Jets in Game 4 of their Stanley Cup Playoffs series. The Blues, again, dominant, beating the President's Trophy winner 5-1, and for the second game in a row, chasing Vezina finalist Connor Hellebuyck from the game as he was pulled after the fifth goal allowed in this one on Sunday. The Blues win it, and now it's a best 2 out of 3 as they'll head back to Winnipeg on Wednesday. We'll talk about that. I don't know exactly the way that this is going to go, folks, but I knew that I didn't have time to do 2 podcasts. And I know that a lot of our audience might be interested in both topics. If not, apologies, rinse and repeat. We'll go back to Cardinals talk coming up on Monday night. They'll be at Cincinnati against the Reds. But I decided we're combining both topics into one episode tonight. We'll still talk down on the farm as we'll get an update on J.J. Weatherholt, a positive one, I think, based on the fact that we hadn't seen him in the lineup. And we'll talk about a Cardinal who is making his way to Cincinnati with the club, reportedly. And it's somebody we haven't seen yet this season. So, roster moves, Cardinals game, Blues game, thoughts on the series. Sorry, no soccer talk. I just don't have it in me. But everything else goes today on b-schaeff Daily. If you like St. Louis sports content, mostly a Cardinals show and a Cardinals channel here, but when in Rome, right? The Blues are buzzing, and we want to make sure to give them their due, and you never know. This hockey stuff could continue deeper into May, maybe into June, a la 2019. We'll see. But let's start with the Cardinals, because I know that's what a lot of folks are all about when it comes to listening to this podcast. It just wasn't a very good result on Sunday. 7-1, the Cardinals lose to the Brewers. Jose Quintana is still a very, very good MLB starting pitcher. I think he ended up being a really savvy pickup by the Milwaukee Brewers as he shut the Cardinals down in this one. 5 innings, 1 run. Sounds familiar for the Cardinals fans that remember Quintana from 2022. He's got just a 1.14 ERA after this game. His ERA actually went up in 5 innings of 1-run baseball. So he's been nails for the Brewers, and if they're not in the mix at the trade deadline, he's somebody that's going to probably fetch a pretty penny from a contending team. We'll see what the Milwaukee Brewers end up being. They're at 14-15 right now. The Cardinals are at 12-16. Cardinals still won this series over the weekend. They just couldn't find the sweep that they were looking for. You didn't get a very good outing from Erick Fedde. I mean, that's the long and short of this game, unfortunately, which is why I felt like we weren't getting a half an hour of conversation out of the game anyway after Erick Fedde just got beat, man. The first inning was rough for him. Gave up 3 runs. Another crooked number in the 4th inning that he allows 4 runs. It just seemed like, and I was at the Blues game, fully admit that, but watching on my laptop, they were squaring up Erick Fedde, and he continues to have a little bit of a hiccup with a couple of walks that were ill-timed as well. 5 2/3 to his credit. He ends up getting deeper into this game, and I think that's sort of the quota, right? Like, that's what the Cardinals starting rotation is going to be asked to do, especially as they look to re-invite Steven Matz to the mix. Later on this week, he's going to make another start for the Cardinals. If you're going back to that 6-man rotation and you have a starter that's just getting shelled out there, sometimes he's going to have to wear it. And that's what we saw from Erick Fedde, who I think for the first time this season was up over 100 pitches, ended up with 103 pitches, but had 2 crooked numbers against him, even stayed in after all 7 of those runs were scored. And it's just what the situation called for because the Cardinals were already a little bit thin with their bullpen. And so that's what he had to do. It's not going to look good for his season numbers. The ERA up to 4.68 for Fedde after allowing 7 earned runs, 10 hits in today's game. But it is what it is. You like the bullpen and what they were able to do behind Fedde. It's going to seem a little bit silly to talk about some of the intricacies of this game when inevitably, Erick Fedde just didn't have it, and the Cardinals offensively didn't do a lot against Quintana or anything against the Milwaukee bullpen. So that was going to be the result that it was going to be. But I do think it's notable that JoJo Romero comes in, had some good velocity, did walk a batter, but recorded a couple of outs, and hopefully he's closer to finding himself because the Cardinals are going to need him. This bullpen is not going to operate in a way that's very productive without him, and I would say without John King, because those are your two lefties. Now that Steven Matz is back in the rotation, at least temporarily, we'll see how long that ends up lasting. But we ended up seeing both lefties, Romero and King, do a nice enough job today. And Matt Swanson got another opportunity to pitch his first time in, maybe 10 days. I think it was that Thursday night in New York to start that road trip a week and a half ago that Swanson got into his first big league game. And he was in that mop-up role a little bit in this one on Sunday, but did a nice job. Perfect 5 outs, inning and 2/3, no runs, no hits, no walks allowed, and struck out a batter. Fact of the matter is, Oliver Marmol's going to have to be a little bit more willing to try some of these guys he doesn't know as much about. And hopefully what Swanson was able to show in a low-stakes environment like this will give Ollie a little confidence that, all right, if there's a right-handed spot in the middle innings, and even if it's a close game, I might be able to go to Matt Swanson, and he might come through. These are the things that you can't really know how a guy's going to respond until you get him in there. I understand trying to wait out the game circumstances over the course of a day, a series, a week, for the right spots to bring in a less experienced reliever like Matt Swanson at the big league level. But this is a guy who's had closing experience in the minors, so he's not completely foreign to leverage situations. Obviously, it's a vastly different conversation at the big league level, but at some point they had to get another touch for Matt Swanson, and it was good to see him in performing in a multi-inning role, an inning and 2/3, faced 5 batters, got 5 outs. He's got a 0 ERA over his 2 appearances this season for the Cardinals. Maybe he's somebody that can, who's to say he can't develop into the role that Kyle Leahy sort of had last year and began this season with, where he's more of that middle inning bridge guy that can go multiples if needed. Because right now it looks like Kyle Leahy is your 7th, 8th inning type, where if Maton's not available, Leahy's your go-to setup guy from the right side. You got to kind of backfill that role, and maybe Matt Swanson could be somebody that can do that for you. So time will tell on that, but it was good to see at least some positives from a game that overall was pretty gnarly for the Cardinals. They go 0 for 11 with runners in scoring position in this game. Lars Nootbaar did reach base 3 times, going 2 for 4 with a walk. Struck out a couple of times, which I don't love because of my bold prediction that he would walk more times this year than he strikes out. I do think he's still in range to be able to accomplish that, but obviously anytime he's striking out a couple of times in a game, I'm kind of looking at that sideways. He, checking the scores, or the stats here, I should say, I still think does have more walks than Ks on the season. Yep, 23 walks, 21 Ks. But gained 1 for the K category today. He was in center field, by the way. First time all season. I remember going back to late March, debating with Joe Roderick on the Sports Hub STL Cardinals show, where I said, I looked dead into the eye of the camera and said, you will not see Lars Nootbaar in center field very much at all this year, if at all. And it took Siani being optioned for it to happen. And Siani was optioned, of course, because of Saggese sticking with the team when Mason Wynn returned from the injured list. And remember at the time, Brendan Donovan was a little bit under the weather. Not really. He was banged up with the rib. The rib popped out of place. Sounds incredibly painful. A couple of days later, he was back and ready to go, but I think it ended up just being that Saggese was here for extra coverage for that. They put him back in the lineup today. He was 0 for 3. Speaking of Saggese, did reach base via walk. He's looking at a .341 batting average, an .876 OPS, and he's also looking at a stint in AAA Memphis because he was optioned, or going to be, I should say, on Monday. According to the reports, I believe I saw Katie Wu with it and John Denton, among others. Saggese down, and it appears Jose Barrero will be coming up for the St. Louis Cardinals to make his Cardinals debut at whichever point that takes place. Now, he's got some big league experience. In fact, it all comes with Cincinnati over a span from 2020 to 2023. Was a former top 100 prospect with the Reds organization. Came up as a very young player, 22 years old. Played 4 years. Just did not really produce offensively the way the prospect capital dictated that he might. A career 497 OPS, 497 on the career OPS for Barrero at the big league level, but spent last year in AAA, didn't do anything. Came to spring training this year with the Cardinals as somebody that you weren't really counting on to make the team, but he made an impression. And now the bat's playing down there in Memphis. I don't believe these baseball reference numbers are updated for inclusion of today's game. Checking to see if Barrero played. He was 1 for 4 with a walk down there in Memphis, or for Memphis, I should say, today. So now he's up to a 913 OPS. He's got a 299 batting mark, and he's going to get the call up and swap places with Thomas Saggese. Now, I don't believe Barrero was on the 40-man roster. I have not seen if it's known what the move will be to get him there. Obviously, he's got to be on the 40-man if he's going to be on the 26-man roster. But Francis Romero, confirmed by Katie Wu, Barrero up, Saggese down. I have thoughts on this. I don't know that they're going to match the thoughts that a lot of Cardinals fans have. I'm sort of resigned at this point to the fact that they're going to give the run at the present day to Nolan Gorman and then Alec Burleson for a lot of those DH situations. If you have a day like today, I believe it was Gorman that was on the bench today against Quintana, which makes sense. That's not a great matchup for him against the lefty. And so if you're going to give a day to Gorman, that would be obviously a day that you don't mind having him on the bench. But typically, they're trying to force feed a little more Nolan Gorman into the daily lineup. He's a second baseman and a DH. Saggese's a second baseman. He could play other infield spots, but Arenado's not sitting. Mason Wynn, when he's on the active roster, is not going to very frequently be sitting. And so there's not really anywhere to put Saggese if they're insisting on a lot of Nolan Gorman, which we know in 2025 is what they're doing. That's the way that this season was billed. Guys like Gorman, guys like Walker, we're going to find out what they've got, and we're going to see them frequently. You might say, well, Saggese's another young guy. Why won't the Cardinals prioritize his playing time? That's not what this year was about, right? Thomas Saggese, a little bit further behind in the pecking order. Guys like Gorman, guys like Walker have been, we're talking 3 big league seasons. In the case of Walker, this is his 3rd year. Gorman, I think it's even more than that. You're trying to find out definitively as these guys get closer and closer to like arbitration and contract-wise decisions needing to be made on what their futures are and what their roles are in the organization. That's not the case for Saggese right now. So as much as I get it, you could try to treat all the young players equally and, throw them all into a pot and let the cream rise. You could do it that way. And look, maybe you'd win more games that way. But the Cardinals are, as much as they do want to win games, there is other stuff going on this year, which is find out about these guys first and foremost. So if Saggese's not going to be able to play frequently, I get it. It's not the worst thing in the world to have somebody that's on your bench that you don't care if he gets playing time. Like Barrero doesn't need playing time. He has a very interesting toolsy type of skill set to where maybe he ends up becoming a more prominently featured player on this roster than we expect, but it doesn't have to go that way, and you're not losing any sleep over it. Thomas Saggese, however, is just 22, 23 years old. The other day I got it wrong saying what his age was, so let me make sure. I think he may have just turned 23. Thomas Saggese age. Yeah, turned 23 in April. So he's a young player. He's a guy that for now, I think he's still at that stage where you want to be getting him daily at-bats. It's the same thing you want for guys like Gorman and Walker. It's just that there's no room to do that with Saggese at the big league level at this moment. Things could look drastically different as the summer goes along, especially if the Cardinals fade out of the race and they do turn into deadline sellers. You can revisit the Arenado stuff, especially if his numbers have increased, which right now they're at a 783 OPS, better than he was last year, but he is coming off of an 0 for 5 today, so the numbers did dip a little bit. But there are conversations going to be had about a lot of different players where playing time could open up. And eventually, you want to get an extended run and look at Saggese too. It's just not yet. So I'm not, as much as I did say, a week ago when that decision was coming to, that the Cardinals, there's no way that John Mozeliak was going to send down Saggese. I kind of pounded the table and just told you guys it wasn't happening. That wasn't from inside information or having been told by a source. It was just the fact that I refused to believe that with the way that Saggese was swinging the bat and nobody else really was, I just didn't think the Cardinals were going to send him down. Turns out I was right, but only temporarily because circumstances have changed. What changed was like a day later, the reports coming out about Ollie Marmol explaining to the beat writers that Gorman's going to get that runway that we talked about. Like, that wasn't something that was publicly known. Like, we always knew the runway was a thing for Gorman this year, but the fact that on this recent stretch of games, they were very meticulously planning it to get him in there as much as possible and, like, making that a new emphasis and a new focal point. So, with all that being said, not shocked that we're seeing this with Saggese. With Jose Barrero, you get a guy that can play shortstop, can play probably the other infield positions, and he also can go out in the outfield if you needed him to. So we'll see. He's got some interesting tools. The bat at the big league level, and even as I mentioned last year in the minors, he was with Round Rock. I believe that's either the Astros or the Rangers. They keep switching back and forth over the years, and I can never remember which they're affiliated with. But he didn't do anything last year in AAA, and so he wasn't getting a lot of looks for big league roster kind of stuff. In the offseason, the Cardinals pick him up, and it looks like a savvy addition, at least with the way that he was playing in AAA. We'll see if he can translate any of that to the big leagues. But otherwise, like I said, 0 for 11 with risk for the Cardinals. They couldn't find a way to pierce Jose Quintana beyond just the 1 run in 5 innings. And overall, not a lot to write home about. Wilson Contreras was 1 for 3, extended the hitting streak to 9 games, and he also reached twice via walk. So he's at the 606 OPS. Couple of home runs in Great American Small Park, and you may see that OPS for Wilson Contreras push towards 700 before the end of April. Stinks it's only a 30-day month, but I said a week ago that I thought I could see Contreras getting to a 700 OPS before the end of the month. He's going to need some power numbers in the first 3 games of that Cincy series in order to make that happen, but we'll see. Let's talk a little bit of Blues hockey, though. We'll double back for Down on the Farm after that, but I want to get into the Blues game a little bit. Try to spend 10 minutes or so here and discuss my interpretations of everything that happened at Enterprise Center this afternoon. 5-1 win for the Blues, and the way that I expected this game to go, right? Down 2-1 in the series, needing the win to tie things up. If you are able to get that win, it's nice to be tied, but you still have to find a way to get a win on the road at some point in this series in Winnipeg in order to claim the series. I thought it would be a very tight game. Game 3, the Blues win 7-2. They just, from the word go, were all over the Jets in that one. And so I thought if they're going to get it back to Winnipeg tied for Game 5, I think this one's going to be a tighter contest where the Blues are going to have to, not learn because they've won in a variety of ways to get to the playoffs this year, but especially in a world without Dylan Holloway right now, the Blues are going to have to learn what that looks like, what their identity is, and maybe have to eke one out in front of the home crowd. It went that way to begin. The first period, frankly, the Blues didn't play very well. Was not impressed with the state of their play in the first 20 minutes of the game. But with about 22 seconds to go in the first period, with the Blues trailing 1-0, Jake Neighbors redirects a knuckle puck from Colton Parayko, and after the game, Neighbors said the puck was coming in so slow, he had time to size it up, time it up, and put the stick on it the way that he wanted to redirect it past Connor Hellebuyck. And they tied the game. You end that first 20 minutes where I thought the Blues, they weren't really finishing on their hits. They weren't checking the same as we saw on Thursday. They weren't really crisp in the puck movement, and the passing lanes were just a little bit. I thought for the first 30 minutes of this game, all of those factors were like a touch off. They were just they were skating a step slow. They just weren't quite cohesive in the way that we saw things really just from the jump on Thursday. And look, when you have a goal that's scored within the first 48 seconds like they did Thursday, and then a minute later you're drawing a power play, and then you're scoring at the end of that power play, like the crowd was jamming, everything was easy. It came very easily to the Blues on Thursday. When it didn't go that way, to see the response that we saw, I think was incredibly impressive. Tied 1-1 after the first period, and so that kind of got you back to equilibrium. I thought, all right, is Jim Montgomery going to have the speech that's going to get him to come out in the second period and really start to light things up again? And even that didn't necessarily happen. First 10 minutes or so of that second period, it was still somewhat lackluster, I thought, from the Blues. But then, once the floodgates opened, boy, did they ever open. And it comes, checking the time on the box score here, at the 10:46 mark of the second period. So a little bit beyond the halfway point. The Blues come up with finally starting to get a little bit of extended offensive zone time. To that point, the Jets had pretty consistently controlled the puck, the first period especially. But even for the early portion of the second period, the Jets had the puck the most of the time. They had some chances. I thought Jordan Binnington was really, really sharp for the Blues for the first half of this game to be able to kind of hold it where it was. But I was so impressed with the Tyler Tucker goal that put the Blues up 2-1, and the way that that came to be was just remarkable to me, because it was really a team effort, a team goal on the Tucker play. And honestly, it all started with Alexander Texier holding a puck in. The Blues were finally getting a little bit of offensive zone time, and there was a play where it was really close to leaving the zone, and he kind of pinned it up against the boards, made sure to chase it down and keep it in, and it extends the zone time for the Blues, and then you just keep churning it. Puck would go into the corner. They'd try to pass it back out and get somebody at the point to be open, to be ready to shoot the puck if they could get it to him. And as I had mentioned, like, the timing was just kind of off all game for the Blues. And so even as they were maintaining puck possession, they still weren't getting that clean look that you, like the little tic-tac-toe, and then everybody's timed up. And then finally they end up getting it on this goal. Texier, again, kind of digging it out of the corner. It gets to Nick Leddy. Leddy punches it to Tucker, one-times it from the point, beats Connor Hellebuyck off Hellebuyck's right side, and I don't think he ever saw it. And if you watch the replay, his immediate reaction is to kind of turn to the referee. I don't know if he thought that what Oskar Sundqvist was doing, flashing across the net in front of him, was interfering in some way. I just thought the timing of all I saw was the dude just skating across the front of the crease. But it was so well timed. He's the only guy that didn't touch the puck basically on the play. But I think he created it, because Sundqvist is just kind of skating across the front of the net right as Leddy is getting the puck, and then he's going to move it to Tucker, bringing in a Jet defender with him, because they don't want to just let him camp in front of the net and get the redirection type of goal like Jake Neighbors got. So it's just timed so fluidly compared to the first, I would say, 30 minutes basically prior to this moment. The Blues couldn't time anything up. And then in this moment, Sundqvist is moving across to the front of the net right as things are developing from Texier to Leddy to Tucker. And I think it was actually the Jets defender more so than Sundqvist that screened Hellebuyck, because his eyes, are going to dart to his left. He sees Sundqvist to his left, his defender flashing in front of his face, doesn't see exactly where Tucker puts the puck, which is right off of his right shoulder, right off of his, right hip, basically, into that side of the net. Absolutely perfectly timed. In a team effort, team type of goal, to kind of, everybody loosens up a little bit for the Blues. Okay, we haven't played our best necessarily, but we finally got crisp. We got crispy with it. And that's really what we saw from the Blues. Their passing, their puck movement, their skating, everything was so crisp on Thursday. It took about half the game, I felt like, for the Blues to get into that on Sunday. But then once they did, it was like things, they started to come in bunches for them. About 5 minutes later, they draw a penalty. This was Tucker's penalty as well, drew on Lowry, and gives you a power play opportunity. And that's where it was like, to be honest with you, because honestly, you're talking about a power play in which the Blues could not have looked worse. It was their worst power play opportunity of the series, maybe of the season. They would get the puck in. I think there was an offsides in the power play. They kept coughing it up and just making it really easy for the Jets to clear it down. And they were disjointed. They couldn't, they were, even as they were trying to like corral the puck and like set up another rush in the defensive zone, the one D-man would pass it to the other guy. He wasn't looking. Just like weird stuff was going on. And so kind of felt like they squandered those 2 minutes. But man, right around when the guy, I believe it was Lowry coming out of the box, if I'm not mistaken, right as he's coming out, Jordan Binnington really deftly moves the puck down with some urgency. Brenden Schaeffer, and the next thing you know, they're at the midline and they're moving with some speed. And I don't really think all of the Jets were able to get involved in the play because of how good Jordan Binnington is moving the puck. You know, the guy's coming off the bench area from the penalty box, and the play is already past him. So even though the power play technically had ended, the Blues were still feeling the advantage of it for that one last rush. And it was timed so well by Binnington. Shen gets it to the middle of the ice. Eventually, Parayko's got the puck, carrying it in, and just kind of flips it to the crease. I think it's an emphasis that Jim Montgomery's been talking about. Just get the pucks to the net and see what happens, right? Make Connor Hellebuyck do things. Make him work for it. And this was a situation where the Blues were, they were forcing the issue a little bit finally, and puck was just laying there in the crease, and there was a little bit of traffic to where Hellebuyck couldn't, locate it right away. But that was a product, I think, of the Blues just starting to turn the momentum of this game. And say what you want about Hellebuyck at home, his road track record in the Stanley Cup playoffs over the course of time has not been glowing. And I think the Blues got into his head. So that puck's laying there in the crease. He can't seem to find it. Brenden Schaeffer, it could not have been easier. I was looking around going, was it really that easy? After 2 minutes of a power play where they couldn't even get a shot attempt? They couldn't even come close to generating a chance? And then Brenden Schaeffer just picks up the puck, flips it in, done. And that 3-1 lead, now it's starting to build. And you're thinking, all right, you get out of this period up 3-1. Famous last words. I said it to Ethan Hannaford on Thursday right before the Cam Fowler goal. And then this time I did the same thing. Turned to Ethan and said, you know what? Get out of this period, 3 minutes or whatever's left, 2.5 minutes remaining. Get out of this period up 3-1. Feeling pretty good about things. And then a moment after I said that, Justin Falk ends up with the goal and makes it 4-1. So the Blues with a 3-0 period, absolutely surreal. It started to feel so easy for them. And then it was just a couple of minutes into the third period, Robert Thomas gets one. On what was honestly, should have been an odd man rush for the Jets, and they squander it. They cough up the puck, and then quickly the Blues are moving the other direction. Sundqvist had all sorts of space, and then just kind of flips it to Thomas and let him charge the net, and he beats Hellebuyck, and he's the last one to do it on the day because that's when they pulled him. 5-1 Blues. No goals were scored the remainder of the period. Blues had some chances, but at that point it was done. They had broken the Jets. They had broken Connor Hellebuyck. It's not necessarily that this is going to be the way the rest of the series goes, but man, was this fun for Game 3 and Game 4, and it did. It changed the tone of the series, and we've got a series now as a result of it. Because if you don't win both those games and defend your home ice, you're in a situation going on the road where Game 5 could be the last game. But that's not the spot now. The Blues know they're coming back home at a minimum for Friday's Game 6, and somebody's going to have a chance to clinch in that Friday Game 6, and we're going to find out on Wednesday whether it's the Blues or the Jets. And I know the Blues haven't won on the road in this series, but if you look at the way that they played Games 1 and 2, they played them close. The Jets just absolutely were not close or competitive in Games 3 and 4 at home for the Blues. They came on the road. They faltered. They folded. It took them a little while to fold in Game 4, but eventually it happened. And it was wild walking into the interview room when the Jets coach was still talking after being in the Blues locker room and hearing from Colton Parayko and Justin Falk. Was asked a question about just sort of the way the Jets got away from their game and basically folded like a cheap tent later in the second period. And he was almost exasperated, their coach, because he didn't really disagree. I think that the reporter used the term unraveled. He said one of the players had said in the locker room, you guys unraveled. And he didn't really disagree with that assertion, and that is what it looked like watching it too. So the Jets are in a spot right now where you're talking about the team with the best record, the most points all season in the NHL, President's Trophy winner, and the Blues got them on their heels. Again, they're going to have the crowd behind them on Wednesday night. It's going to be a late game, 8:30 p.m. We're having a blast, by the way, on the Sports Hub STL post games. Should definitely check that out and join us. I don't know if I'll even be on it Wednesday night, but I'd like to be if they'll have me. We'll see what that ends up looking like. I've been on there the last couple of days because I've been covering the home games. But when you compare the way the Blues played on the road and the Jets played on the road, there is no comparison. But the Blues have since upped their game even more so compared to the solid games they played in games 1 and 2. Games 1 and 2, they started strong, good first periods, faded as those games went along. Compare that to how the Jets played on the road. The Blues just absolutely blitzed them in game 3. There was really no room for us to learn how the Jets were going to play that game in sort of like an even-up stance because it never happened. The Blues immediately seized control of it. Game 4, though, we saw kind of an even first period. I would say the Blues were outplayed, but the score was even. And then the first 9.5 minutes or so of the second period was very similar to that. But ultimately, the Blues ended up getting that next goal, and they never looked back from there. And this is a 60-minute hockey game. So the Jets can play 30 good minutes and then completely get away from their game, and the Blues were there relentless when it was, when they sensed that opening. Finding a way to do a combination of what they've done in first periods on the road in Winnipeg and then getting better as the game went along in Game 4, which I think was the first time in the series we saw the Blues do that, is going to be imperative. But, man, it's going to be a lot of fun to look forward to that game on Wednesday night. Let me know your thoughts on the Blues. I said before the series began Blues in 6, but I got to be honest, it felt more like a kind of like what you're supposed to say, like the homer take. But I did say, man, if they could get one in Winnipeg, that's going to be all they need because we've seen how good the Blues have been at home. Well, they haven't gotten the one in Winnipeg yet, but they have defended home ice pretty splendidly, a combined 12-3, right, in goals. So they've done their job so far at home. They're going to get another chance on Friday. Really feels like Game 5 is the one you're going to want to get in Winnipeg. If you got to get one, you'd rather it not be the Game 7. Let it be Game 5 and then come home on Friday with a chance to clinch. And then once that happens, man, all bets are off on what could possibly happen the rest of the way for St. Louis during these playoffs. We've seen it before. Just get through the first round, and all bets are off is the way that it feels. But let me know in the comments what you guys think of what's going on with the Blues right now. Man, it was fun at Enterprise Center. It really was. And I'll be back there on Friday night. But we'll shift back to Cardinals to wrap this up because we do have to go down on the farm. It's time to go down on the farm. Brought to you by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs.
You'll be happier than a jackass eating thistle.
Huh? So let's go ahead and start in Springfield because we said we would give you that update with J.J. Weatherholt. He returned to the lineup. They're still playing in Wichita this weekend. 12-4 the winners for Springfield in that matchup. But we did see J.J. Weatherholt return to the lineup. Not back in the field yet, but he was DHing for the AA Cardinals. Went 0-for-4, drew a walk, but the fact that he's back in the lineup, that's good news. Remains the case that we want to see what he does. We had said, for the rest of April, but then he missed a week of games. So a week or two from now, where's he at? Is he still OPSing .910 and hitting .333 like he is? If so, at what point do the Cardinals consider bumping him up from AA to AAA? And at that point, you're one step away from the big leagues. That's really all we're waiting to see at this point for J.J. Weatherholt. Continue to fill the stat sheet, to continue to do what he's been doing at AA. That jump where he didn't even go to high A, Peoria, at all. Didn't really know what to expect from him when he got to Springfield as a result of that, but it's been pretty clear that it hasn't fazed him. The jump so far has not fazed him. It wouldn't be surprising to see him have a little bit of a lull and a downturn, but the beauty of it is he's going to get every opportunity to work through, and we're going to get to see what it looks like. But I would say if he consistently continues to show that he has mastered AA, which if you got a 900 OPS, I would say you're in a really good spot. If that continues, yeah, we could see him in Memphis within the next month or so. We'll see. That's what's going on in AA. AAA, Cardinals lose to Norfolk 6-4 on Sunday. We talked about Barrero being in that lineup. Not a lot to talk about from the lineup. Everybody had a hit except for Mike Antico. Everybody was one for something in that lineup today. Michael McGravy was a starting pitcher. This was a lesser outing from him, 3 2/3, gave up 3 runs, 3 walks, 4 hits, had 4 strikeouts, and did allow a home run. But his ERA, 4.08 down there. The loss actually went to Nick Anderson, though, who went 2 innings and gave up a couple of runs. His ERA is 4.5. Rodri Munoz gave up a run. His ERA is 4.5. This is what it is down there. We'll see McGravy eventually. Like to see him sharp, but I don't think anything he really does down there is going to impact whether or not the Cardinals believe he's ready. It's more of a product of what does their roster look like, and the readiness for him is going to be determined by that. All right, that is going to do it for me on this Sunday night, now Monday, as you listen to this podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening, for staying with me, and we'll be excited to break down the Cardinals series and any other Blue stuff that may come up. Let me know your feedback on what was definitely a kind of popcorn type of episode of B-Schaeff Daily with talking about 2 sports, but I just can't I can't not talk about the Blues right now because I'm covering it closely, and it's definitely got the city excited. So hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.